When you walk into a room filled with tension, when voices rise and tempers flare, there is a great temptation to react. The mind becomes alert, the body tightens, and the heart begins to beat a little faster. These are natural signals, evolutionary responses designed to prepare us for danger or confrontation. But the question is not whether these responses arise, it is whether you choose to follow them. To stay calm when others are angry, the very first task is not to deal with the people outside of you. It is to master the climate within. Just as the weather changes outside, your inner world is also made of seasons and storms. There are days when your thoughts are bright and still like a clear sky, and there are moments when heavy clouds of frustration, fear, or impatience roll in without warning, when you begin to see your thoughts and emotions like weather patterns, temporary, shifting, and not always within your control. You also begin to understand that resisting them is not the answer. Control does not mean to force silence on your inner storm. It means to observe it without panic, to allow it to come and go without losing your center. Most people live their entire lives reacting to their surroundings. If someone shouts, they shout back. If someone blames, they defend. If the crowd panics, they run with it. In doing so, they give their power away again and again. They let the moods of others dictate the state of their own being. This is the root of instability. The moment you tie your peace to the behavior of others, you have lost it. To stay calm when others are angry, you must untie your serenity from their chaos. Imagine your mind like a still lake. When others throw stones of anger into that lake, the surface may ripple, but the depth remains untouched. If your mind is shallow, even the smallest disturbance will be felt throughout. But when your mind has depth, cultivated through practice, stillness, and awareness, then even great storms cannot reach the bottom. The mastery of your internal climate begins with deepening your awareness of your reactions. What makes you tense? What words trigger a reaction in your chest? What facial expressions or tones of voice provoke your instinct to fight or withdraw? Until you have mapped the landscape of your own reactivity, you will always be a servant to the emotions of others. Staying calm is not about pretending not to feel. It is not about putting on a smile while fire burns in your chest, and that is suppression, and suppression is pressure waiting to explode. Instead, you must meet your emotions like a wise teacher meets an unruly student, not with judgment, but with understanding. When anger arises in you in response to others' anger, do not immediately act or speak. First, notice it. Where does it arise? Is it in your hands, your jaw, your chest? Observe it like a scientist, not like a victim. The act of observation itself begins to dissolve the intensity. Why? Because awareness is spacious and emotion is tight. When you bring spaciousness to tightness, it begins to relax. Now, ask yourself what is mine and what belongs to others. Many people carry the emotions of others as if they are their own. But just because someone is angry in your presence does not mean their anger belongs to you. You do not need to internalize it. You do not need to match their frequency. You can witness their storm without becoming the rain. This is the essence of mastering your internal climate. You become the observer, not the participant, unless participation is truly needed. Not all fires require your water. Sometimes the fire dies faster when it is given no fuel. Mastering your internal climate also means creating a space of rest within yourself that you return to regularly. Through meditation, silence, reflection, or deep breath, you begin to build a home within, a center of gravity that does not shift with the emotional weather of the world. Then, when you walk into spaces where others are tense or aggressive, your internal compass does not point outward. It points inward, always reminding you where stillness lives. People will try to provoke. Life will test your balance. But if you have practiced returning to the center even in solitude, you will recognize the path back to calm even amidst noise. Most importantly, you must remember that your internal climate is not dependent on being alone or on silence around you. It must be strong enough to remain clear even when surrounded by noise. This is the real test. Anyone can feel peaceful on a mountain or by the sea, but to remain inwardly still in a room full of rage, that is the path of mastery. This level of calm is not born from passivity or indifference. It is born from strength, inner strength, a strength that does not need to dominate others, but simply does not bow to their turbulence. A strength that chooses response over reaction, clarity over confusion, and groundedness over being swept away. To walk among those who are angry, frustrated, or emotionally volatile without being disturbed is a skill that is rooted in inner clarity and energetic discernment. Many people misunderstand what it means to be present with others. They believe that to care means to carry. They believe that to understand someone's suffering, they must absorb it. But this is not understanding. It is identification. And when you begin to identify with someone else's emotional energy, you lose the boundary between what is yours and what is theirs. To remain calm in a space of anger, you must see clearly without becoming entangled. Each person emits a certain energetic frequency based on their emotional state. When a person is angry, their energy is sharp, fast, heavy. Their words cut, their gestures are tense, and their presence often presses against your own field of awareness. If you are not rooted in yourself, you will start to match this energy unconsciously. This is the law of emotional contagion. Like tuning forks placed next to each other, emotional energy tends to synchronize. But this law only applies to those who are unaware. The one who is aware can choose to observe without synchronizing. This is where true understanding begins. To understand emotional energy does not mean to judge it. It does not mean to label someone as good or bad based on their mood. It simply means to recognize what is moving through them without allowing it to move into you. When someone throws anger in your direction, you can either catch it, hold it, and respond with more anger, or you can let it pass by like wind through the trees. Not every emotion requires your attention. Not every outburst demands your involvement. Most of the time, people are not angry at you. They are angry near you, but if you absorb their energy, you make it personal, and in doing so, you become part of their storm. This is not about becoming cold or disconnected. It is about staying awake. It is about standing at the edge of someone's emotional fire without being burned. To do this, you need to develop a subtle awareness of your own energy body. Just as skin protects your internal organs, your awareness protects your mind and heart from being pierced by harmful energies. When you sense the presence of anger in someone, do not resist it. Resistance is tension, and tension is what opens the gates for energy to enter. Instead, relax, expand your awareness, soften your breath, and observe. Observation is your shield. It is not apathy. It is deep attention without contamination. When you observe someone's anger closely, you will see that it is rarely about the present moment. It is usually the result of something older: pain, fear, memory, disappointment. Anger is often the outer shell of inner pain. If you can see the pain without reacting to the shell, you will not be drawn into the drama. You will not take the attack personally, even if the words seem aimed at you. You will understand that the person is speaking from a place of their own suffering. And when you see this, your presence becomes a mirror, not a sponge. You reflect, but you do not absorb. There is a great strength in this posture, the strength of the mountain that watches the storm but does not chase it, the strength of the river that flows past the debris without clinging to it. When others are angry, you do not need to fix them. You do not need to correct them. Often, trying to control their emotions only feeds the fire. Instead, become the space in which their energy is seen but not fed. This kind of space is powerful. It disarms without force. It soothes without words. It transforms not by doing, but by being. Understanding emotional energy also means understanding your own limits. There are moments when the atmosphere around you is so intense that your own energy begins to tremble. In these moments, do not feel guilty for stepping away. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. Just as you would leave a room filled with smoke to find clean air, it is sometimes necessary to leave a room filled with toxic emotions to find your center again. You can only offer clarity when you are clear. You can only bring calmness when you are calm. If you try to help others from a disturbed state, you only add to the confusion. Breath awareness becomes a key tool in this practice. The breath anchors you to the present. When you feel someone else's energy trying to enter your field, return to your breath. Feel the rise and fall. Notice how it connects you to your body, to the ground, to the moment. The breath reminds you that you are here and that no matter how loud the world becomes, there is a place within you that remains untouched. In this way, understanding emotional energy becomes not just a practice for moments of conflict, but a lifelong discipline. It teaches you to walk in the world with open eyes and a grounded heart. You become like the sky, able to hold both sunshine and storm without clinging to either. And in doing so, you begin to live from a place of steady awareness, free from the need to mirror the chaos of others. You stand in clarity, not as a reaction to anger, but as your natural state. When surrounded by anger, the most common impulse is to defend, to retaliate, or to speak louder than the voice that challenges you. But what truly responds in these moments, what inside of you rises to meet the confrontation? It is not your clarity. It is not your calmness. It is the ego, subtle or loud, visible or hidden, always ready to react when it feels attacked or disrespected. To remain calm in the presence of anger is not only a matter of emotional control, it is the art of neutralizing the ego before it takes over. Ego is not just pride, it is the structure in the mind that defines itself through identity and defense. It is the part of you that needs to be right, that feels insulted when ignored, that cannot allow others to have the last word. Ego thrives on conflict because conflict is how it confirms its own sense of self. The louder the world becomes, the more the ego wants to speak, the more it feels provoked, the more it demands to react. And this reaction is rarely grounded in truth. It is rooted in preservation, in the deep fear of being diminished in front of others. But a calm mind does not fear being diminished. It does not see disagreement as an attack. It does not seek to win in conversations where no peace can be found. To stay calm when others are angry, one must recognize the ego's impulse to jump into the fire and gently choose not to follow. This does not mean to become passive or weak. It means to become wise. Wisdom does not waste its breath on arguments that burn energy and build walls. Wisdom observes when the ego is being triggered and chooses stillness instead of escalation. In the heat of emotion, ego speaks in the language of urgency. It tells you that you must say something now, that you must prove yourself now. That silence will be seen as weakness. But urgency is not clarity. It is the noise before understanding. In these moments, instead of reacting outwardly, begin to turn inward. Ask yourself, what am I trying to protect? Why does this moment feel like a threat? You will often find that the anger is not yours. It is the ego's fear of being invisible, of being disrespected, of losing control. When you see this clearly, a space opens. That space is the doorway back to calmness. To neutralize the ego does not mean to destroy it. Ego is not an enemy. It is a part of the structure of the human experience. But it is meant to serve, not to lead. When it leads, the mind becomes restless, always chasing approval or defending its territory. But when it serves a deeper awareness, it becomes quiet, humble, and responsive instead of reactive. You do not have to argue with the ego. You simply need to see it for what it is, a temporary voice that rises in defense of an identity you no longer need to prove. One of the most powerful practices in moments of emotional heat is to allow the ego's discomfort without acting on it. To feel the tightness in the chest, the rise in the throat, the heat in the face, and yet not become it. To notice the impulse to speak sharply and instead breathe. To sense the desire to correct someone and instead pause. In these spaces of pause, the ego loses its momentum. Without reaction, it cannot survive. It needs your voice, your action, your urgency. Deny it those things, and then it fades back into silence. It is important to recognize that others who are angry are also speaking from their own ego. When you respond from your own, two flames meet. But when you meet fire with space, the dynamic shifts. You no longer mirror their state. You reflect it without attachment. This reflection can be uncomfortable for the other person because your lack of reaction does not feed their fire. Sometimes this will escalate their frustration, but it is not your responsibility to manage their emotions. Your only responsibility is to manage the space you bring into the interaction. There is also a deeper dimension here, a silence. Not silence as withdrawal, but silence as strength. The kind of silence that comes not from fear, but from mastery. To not respond immediately, to not defend your ego, to not rise to provocation, this is not avoidance. It is power, but it must come from understanding, not from suppression. If you suppress your response without awareness, the tension builds and later explodes. But if you watch the ego in real time, see it wanting speak, wanting to act, and simply allow it to dissolve through your attention, the result is different. There is no inner conflict. There is peace, and in this state, something else emerges. Compassion, when your own ego is no longer at the center of the interaction, you begin to see the other person more clearly. You see their pain, their fear, their reactivity. You do not judge it, you simply understand it. And this understanding is not weak, it is clarity. It allows you to stay rooted, not because you are suppressing your voice, but because you are speaking from beyond the noise. You are no longer defending a false identity. You are present, and presence is stronger than any argument. To neutralize the ego is to step out of the story that says you must win, you must be heard, you must protect your image. Without that story, there is only the moment. And in the moment, calmness is not something you try to create. It is what remains when the ego steps aside. In moments of emotional turbulence, when people raise their voices and the environment becomes thick with tension, the most subtle and powerful tool you possess is your breath. Yet it is often the first thing forgotten. People caught in the storm of conflict tend to breathe shallowly, rapidly, or even hold their breath entirely. This unconscious shift in breath reflects a shift in the internal state. The breath and the mind are deeply intertwined. Where the mind goes, the breath follows. But what is often not recognized is that where the breath goes, the mind can also be guided. To remain calm in a space where anger fills the air, the breath becomes your anchor. It is the bridge between the storm around you and the clarity within you. While others may be reacting, you return to a deeper rhythm, a slower, quieter pulse that cannot be disturbed by external noise unless you allow it. You do not need to speak to regain balance. You do not need to argue to feel centered. You simply need to breathe fully and consciously with awareness, not just of the air entering and leaving, but of the way each breath reconnects you to presence. Most people live at the surface of their breath. It remains in the chest, a quick and automatic, barely noticed, but the breath has depth. When allowed to expand into the belly, when inhaled through the nose with awareness and released through the mouth with intention, it becomes a purifier. A calm breath is not just a biological response. It is an energetic choice. It tells the nervous system that there is no threat, that there is no need to prepare for battle. That safety can be found not in controlling the outside world, but in mastering the inside. When everyone around you is caught in anger, breathing consciously is the invisible shift that separates you from the reactionary pattern. You become the still point in a turning world. This stillness does not come from passivity. It comes from a conscious decision to return to what is always available, the breath. Inhale, aware of the present moment. Exhale, releasing the need to control what others think or feel. Each breath becomes a reminder that you do not need to match the energy that surrounds you. You have your own internal rhythm, and it does not have to change just because others have lost theirs. Breathing is not an escape. It is a confrontation of the moment with clarity. Rather than engaging in the chaos, you choose to remain rooted. This rooting does not happen in the mind, which can easily be swept away in stories and interpretations. It happens in the body. The body, through the breath, becomes the foundation of calm. When you feel the rising tension in your chest, when you sense the urge to react, you bring your attention downward into the lower belly, the diaphragm, the earth beneath your feet. You breathe into the core of your being, not as a technique, but as a return to your true center. In this space, you begin to notice a gap, a space between stimulus and response. When someone speaks harshly, there is a moment before you speak. That moment is filled with breath. If you rush past it, you are reacting. If you enter it, you are responding. That gap is small at first, but the more you practice conscious breathing, the more spacious it becomes. You begin to live not from the urgency of emotion, but from the clarity of presence. And presence always begins with the breath. Even the mind begins to quiet in the presence of deep, rhythmic breathing. Thoughts lose their sharpness. The need to defend or speak fades. What remains is awareness, wide and open, not fixated on winning or convincing, but simply observing. And in this observation, a deeper wisdom begins to arise. An intuitive knowing of when to speak, when to stay silent, when to walk away, when to stand firm. This wisdom does not come from calculation. It comes from the body, from the breath, from alignment with the moment as it is. There is something sacred about choosing breath over reaction. It is a statement to the world and to yourself that you do not need to be dragged into the patterns of others. It is a discipline of great inner strength. People may not notice that you are breathing deeply in that moment. They may not see the calmness you are cultivating from the inside out, but they will feel it. The energy of a calm presence alters the room. It does not force change. It invites it, not through words, but through vibration. And the breath is what generates that vibration. This is why the breath is often the foundation of martial arts, of meditation, of all internal disciplines that lead to mastery. It is simple yet profound, always available, yet often ignored. It does not require special conditions. You can return to it at any time, in an argument, in a meeting, in a crowded street, or in solitude. And each time you do, you become less entangled in the chaos of others and more rooted in the clarity of your own being. The breath becomes your center, your guide, your companion in the storm. In a world that often rewards loudness, reaction, and dominance, the quiet person is frequently overlooked or misunderstood. Yet it is this very quietness that holds the greatest strength. When you enter a space where anger has taken over, where voices are raised and people are no longer listening, but only reacting, the tendency is to either add to the noise or retreat from it completely. But there is another way, a middle path, a way of being that neither fights nor flees. It is the way of stillness. To be still among the chaos is not to withdraw, but to embody something that others have forgotten exists. Stillness is not the absence of sound, movement, or emotion. It is presence without turbulence. It is the calm gaze that sees clearly through confusion, the grounded breath that does not rise with every insult, the awareness that remains spacious even when the room is heavy with tension. This kind of stillness cannot be faked. It must be lived, it must be practiced when no one is watching, so that it becomes available when everyone is watching. And when it is real, when it comes from a place of deep inner alignment, it carries more weight than all the shouting in the room combined. Most people, when angry, are searching for something without realizing it. They are seeking to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, to be validated. Anger is a voice calling out from a place of disconnection. But when that voice is met with anger, it escalates. When it is met with stillness, something different happens. There is a subtle shift. A person might not immediately calm down, but they will feel the contrast. They will feel the difference between their own chaos and your calm. And in that difference, there is space for reflection. This stillness does not come from superiority. It does not say, I am better than you because I am calm. That would only be another expression of ego. True stillness is humble. It listens without absorbing, sees without judging, holds space without trying to fix. It trusts that clarity is more powerful than control. And this trust is what makes the calm person a source of strength. In a room full of anger, this presence becomes a silent invitation for others to return to their own center, for others to recognize how far they've drifted from themselves. To become the stillness others forgot, you must first become familiar with stillness yourself. This cannot be achieved by force. Stillness is not something you do, it is something you allow. It arises naturally when you stop interfering with the present moment, when you are no longer arguing with what is, when you are no longer trying to manage everyone's emotions or protect your identity, then stillness begins to emerge. It is always there beneath the surface noise, but you have to stop chasing the noise in order to hear it. When you begin to live from this stillness, your actions and words take on a different quality. You do not rush to speak. You are not quick to defend. You respond when needed and remain silent when not. You do not give in to the pool of drama, nor do you judge those who are caught in it. Instead, you hold your posture like a tree rooted deep into the earth. The winds of conflict may blow, but they do not shake your core. And because you are not shaken, others begin to feel that they too can return to stillness. It is important to understand that stillness is not weakness. It is not inaction. It is the strongest response to chaos because it is not born from fear or confusion. It is born from presence, and presence is what the world is starving for: authentic, grounded, and non-reactive presence. Most people have forgotten how to be present because they are lost in thinking, in reacting, in defending. When you embody stillness, you do not need to explain it. You do not need to argue for its value. People feel it. They might not understand what they are feeling at first, but they recognize that in your presence, something inside them begins to settle. This is the power of embodied calm. It transforms without needing to control. It teaches without needing to speak. It reflects without needing to correct. And it offers a kind of strength that does not compete but simply remains. Others may still be angry. They may still be loud. But your stillness becomes a mirror in which they begin to see themselves more clearly. Not because you have pointed it out, but because your calm exposes their chaos without resistance. Stillness also offers you freedom. Freedom from being pulled into every conflict. Freedom from being emotionally hijacked by other people's moods. Freedom from the endless need to prove, argue, or dominate. It gives you the space to choose, not based on habit, fear, or pride, but based on clarity. And this clarity is what allows you to hold peace, not as a fragile thing to be protected, but as a natural state of being that cannot be taken by someone else's anger. You no longer fear tension. You no longer fear emotional storms because you have become the calm within them. And from this calm, you can offer what the world has forgotten.